very true that I am the proudest Delconian. I'm surprised they let me in. I didn't know if the jean jacket was a little too much like, oh, he might rob the joint. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank Eric and both Jeff for how well they've done this evening, and give them a round of applause, please. The painting I picked is the same as Jeff's because, let's face it, great minds think alike. A temperance meeting. To me, this painting is a political statement more than anything else. At the time it was painted, women didn't, we can basically say that the farm animals on the farm had more rights than the women during that period. And if, at this time, women were the spearhead of the temperance movement. Doing a little research about this paper, I found out just how much alcohol Americans drank. Because it turns out when you don't have access to clean water, it's probably better to drink whiskey. So, but it made me think of all, if you look at the painting itself, the woman is illuminated. It's almost like you can see her power rising. At the same time, she's nourishing this young farmhand, this man, and it made me think of just how powerful and healing women can be. If you look closely, she's not only illuminated in power, and she's overshadowing this man to somehow signal that women are on the rise, but she's also providing him shade while he's working. And it made me think about all the strong and powerful women I've been lucky to have in my life, starting with my mother. My mother was a woman named Kathleen. She was 5'1", Irish Catholic from South Philadelphia. She has been dead for 23 years. I am still afraid of her because I feel like at any moment she could come back and start yelling at me. But my mother was, the best way I can describe my mother, besides terrifying, my mother didn't give a shit about anything or anybody or societal conventions. She was opinionated, she was loud, she was funny, she could walk into a room and command it immediately. And very, very funny woman. I remember I was 9 years old and I was in 3rd grade and I was doing a book report about the 1960s. And I turned to my mother and I said, hey, Mom, I read about a lot of these protests that the women were doing. Did you burn your bra? And she just looked at me and lit a Virginia Slim and said, no, I have big breasts. I was too busy wearing it to work. So my mother was a very unconventional woman. I remember years later, I was 15 years old, and she told me to sit down at the kitchen table. Now, we had this beautiful breakfast room that my father had built, that my mother basically used it as her pulpit. So she summoned me to sit next to her at the kitchen table. And again, she lit a Virginia Slim, because you've come a long way, baby. And she said, I want to talk to you about sex. And I was like, I don't ever want to do this. Can we please skip this? So she lit her cigarette, took one long drag, and looked at me and said, keep your pecker in your pocket. But as I got older, I realized that these were the type of women I liked, especially when I was 15 and 16. And they were very hard to come by in the 90s in Upper Darby High School, to find women that were that bold and that aggressive and that themselves. And I had given up by my senior year that I would never meet a woman that would, of the same caliber as my mother. Until one day I met a woman named Susan. Now, Susan had been an acquaintance of mine. We had gone to the same high school and grew up in the same neighborhood. But she was insanely smart, so she ended up going to a private school. So Susan, we had mutual friends, and we would run into each other from time to time. And we were at a party in February of 1996. And she said, hey, I think you're cute. And I went, that's wonderful. And then she drugged me under a dining room table and made out with me. And I was like, oh, I'm sold. We can do this. Now, like most high school relationships, it was doomed from the start. Actually, you can track our relationship on the Oasis scale. We started when the song Wonderwall was big and ended at just when Don't Look Back in Anger hit #1. But we broke up, and we both, we were in the same kind of group of friends, and we had all rented shore houses down the shore. So I spent my summer like staring off lonely into the beach, like smoking cigarettes, like completely still in love with her and heartbroken, while she was just like making out with half the town, you know? So it wasn't until that September where she transferred back she went to Fordham for a brief period, didn't work out, and she made a very brief stop at community college because she's brilliant, and I kind of belong there, you know. And we realized that we were best friends, that we didn't work as a couple, we didn't work in a romantic setting, but as friends, we were perfect. And it turns out that chance meeting that we would meet in that hallway in Delaware County Community College. Don't worry, I went to Temple after. Like, let's relax. Majored in film. Why do you think I'm doing comedy? It would become the friendship that would define my life, and it would set. During periods of tumult, for instance, 2 years ago, I found myself divorced, and not on the really good side of thinking women were great. Like, I know we've all broken up with people, and you're like, oh my God, all men suck. Like, we've been there, you know? But she slowly kind of pulled me out of this dark spot and kind of was like, okay, you're going to get better and things are going to be okay. And I had spent years and years and years trying to figure out why I kept dating the wrong women. Because let me be honest with you, my type, if you've ever seen Real Housewives, that is so my type. So like if you want to like try to date me, just come out and just start yelling at me, but put on a lot of makeup first, please. Please. I can't stress that enough. But I had gotten it all wrong. The reason I was friends with Susan, and the reason that why we were so connected, is that Susan reminded me of my mother, and that Susan was very much like my mother. And although we were not romantically compatible, we were best friends. And I think about, when I look at this picture, you look at this woman, it's almost like she has a healing light to her, and she's nourishing him with milk, which where we all know can come from in certain places. We're adults. And I think about that, and I started to think about what I want in a woman, what I've always searched for and what I looked for, and what I realized is I want someone like her, but not my best friend. So recently I started dating a very nice young woman. She's blonde and tiny and fierce and terrifying. And then I feel like maybe, after all these years and all this positive female energy that I've been around, that just maybe I may have gotten it right. Thank you very much. Have a good night.